It will be given its proper place in the idea of that whole person structure. It will be allowed to simply perform as it was designed to perform. It will not be overburdened with tasks and jobs that do not belong to it, and not only do not belong to it, but for which it is not designed, not capable of actually carrying out. As we have said previously in other transmissions, physical personality is not designed, is not capable, literally not designed to know how something is going to happen. It's not designed to read the giant template where the higher mind resides. It is only designed to know how something is happening or has happened in physical reality. So the idea is that when the ego forgot that it was connected to the higher mind, it thought it needed to take on the duty, the job description of the higher mind of trying to figure out how everything is going to happen. Well, this is my dream, this is my desire. Now, how am I going to make that happen? I don't know, but I'm going to try, I'm going to struggle, I'm going to pull a little at this, I'm going to grab at straws, I'm going to reach out, flail around till I can figure out how to make this work, how to force it to work, how to push everything together in the way that I want it to be. When in fact, it's simply the idea of allowing the higher mind to bring it to you in the way the higher mind knows is best for the whole person that you have chosen to be and best for the themes that you have chosen to explore. Only the higher mind knows how it is best for that to happen, because only the higher mind can see all the way to the horizon, can see the full path ahead, knows where all the twists and turns are, and thus knows what is actually the quickest route to the manifestation of your dreams. But when the physical ego thinks that it knows the best route, it will constantly be slamming into walls, bouncing off of rocks, banging its head into walls and all sorts of things, because it believes that it knows, and it is the only thing that knows, and it will insist on going certain ways that it has been taught to believe is the quickest path to its dreams and desires, but which very often is actually the longest route. So instead of going around these things, around the things that it defines as obstacles, it will stand in front of them and constantly bash itself against these obstacles instead of listening to the higher mind that tells it that even though it may seem to take a little longer to go around, it's actually the quickest route, because by going around you will go that much more quickly than the time it will take for you to stand there and smash your head against the wall until you finally figure out you're not going to go through it. So the idea, again, is to recognize that physical mind does not have the capacity to know how something's going to happen. Let that be the job of the higher mind. Just allow the physical mind to enjoy what it is brought, to see how it happened, to marvel at the synchronicity of how the higher mind was capable of organizing events, so that it would serve the idea of the theme you chose to explore in the most loving, creative, beneficial, joyful way possible, most playful way possible. You must learn that the physical mind and the higher mind need to work together in order to be the whole person. Because if, in that sense, you are only using your physical personality, your physical mind, in an attempt to figure out how everything is supposed to work, you are literally walking through life half-witted. You're only using half of your full mind. So the idea is to understand that you really don't have a whole mind until you form a reconnection and a relationship and a communication style with the higher mind that allows you free-flowing trust, free-flowing communication in that relationship of functioning like a whole being. Now, imagination has been given as part of the personality structure to allow it to understand that it always has access to the higher mind. Imagination is the conduit, the pipeline to the higher mind and from the higher mind. But again, when the ego structure becomes so crystallized, so densified that it thinks it's the one in charge and has to figure every single little thing out, It will not trust the imagination. It will shut the door to the imagination because it seems unreal, superfluous, having nothing to do with what the ego has determined are the necessary things it must do to get where the person wants to go. So it will close and constrict that pipeline, and it will not trust the imagination because it seems like the imagination is irrelevant, has nothing at all to do with what the ego has determined are the necessary steps. But what it has done by doing that is it has constricted the flow of communication coming from the higher mind that is actually the kind of information the physical personality needs in order to actually relax itself and move on through life in an effortless way. The idea, again, is to understand that once you form a relationship with the higher mind, once you form a balanced relationship with it, imagination is the conduit through which inspiration will come, and in which you will allow the physical personality to know that it is in constant communication with the person up on the boat, and that it will never be guided into a crevasse, it will never be guided into the mouth of a shark. It will always be guided straight toward the horizon that represents the dream and the theme that the personality chose to explore, and all the transitions can happen quite magically when those lines of communication are open. Again, we remind you of this. Very often, the ego might be willing to use the imagination a little bit, but again, it often subverts the use of the imagination for its own purposes, to reinforce its own ideas of what it thinks is the best way to allow something to manifest. The physical personality may be willing from time to time to create a vision, an ideal vision of the dream. It will create all the scenario. You have heard us say, and you've heard many say, visualize, visualize, visualize. Create a mock-up in your mind's eye, in your imagination, of the ideal scenario that represents to you the idea of your highest excitement, your highest passion. And this is a good thing to do. This is a positive thing to do. It is a beneficial and creative thing to do, to use your imagination and visualize what is a representation, the closest possible representation you can create with your physical mind of that ideal scenario that you say is representative of your passion, of your dream. But here is the key. It is only a representation. Now, this is not to say that what you imagine at that moment cannot come to pass exactly as you have imagined it. Oftentimes, it happens exactly that way, and that is all well and good. But the only reason it may have happened that way is you actually allowed a momentary opening and actually recognized what the higher mind was telling you was the representation of the best way for you. Nevertheless, here is where many individuals on your planet fall into the trap. Again, because of the ego structure's predilection for thinking it has to figure everything out and know how everything is going to happen. When the ego structure may make a vision that is representative of the ideal reality, what the ego tends to think, because it thinks of itself as the highest possible authority for your person, it tends to think that that vision it has created by using imagination in that way to paint that picture in your mind, it thinks that that's the highest possible way in which that reality could manifest. But from the higher mind's point of view, that picture that to the ego seems like the highest possible manifestational form is actually the lowest possible manifestational form. What to the physical ego is the ceiling, to the higher mind is the floor. It can go much higher than that, and in fact, it can actually go so high, so far, it can actually be beyond physical mind's capability of imagining how it could occur. That's why you do not need to insist. The physical mind and the ego does not need to insist that the picture it conjures up as a representation of the ideal scenario must be the exact way that it must manifest, otherwise something has failed, something has gone wrong. It is just used as a template to pass on to the higher mind the basic idea that represents, pay attention, the proper vibrational state of being that the physical being needs to experience in life. in order to perpetuate its joy. The higher mind will take that template, take that representation, because after all, it exists in a template reality. It understands template language very well. That's its native tongue. Template symbols are its native tongue. It understands symbols very well. It will take that symbol and recognize that that symbol simply represents the proper state of being, the proper energy that needs to be created. And so the higher mind will then take that symbol and it will reach out to all the things it understands are available, all of the how can this happen sort of thing, and it will match those things to the proper template frequency and then bring that into the reality, the opportunities for the physical mind to act upon. But when the physical mind hesitates to act on the synchronicities that are brought to it because the ego says, I don't recognize that as the template I set up, and doesn't trust that the higher mind could have actually brought it the opportunity it wants in a different form other than what the ego determined it should be, it will refuse to act on those things. It will refuse to recognize those as opportunities. Those opportunities coming from the higher mind will even be invisible to the physical mind. It just simply won't even know they are even there to be acted upon. And therefore it will miss those doorways and will never walk through them and will never see the manifestation of its desires because it has been too insistent on the how and not allowed the higher mind to actually show the physical mind the true how, because the higher mind can actually imagine ways far beyond the physical mind's imagining of how such a thing could occur.